Hey everybody, it's Marty the party, JavaScript party, and Rhett, my trusty coding buddy. And today I'm making a video. Right now I'm making a video in my use it or lose it area. Basically, I don't really like making videos about these sorts of things, but I think it's important that if you are in a position where your job is really cool, they're not going to fire you because they heard something. That you said something and you're financially stable and stuff like that, you really need to exercise your freedom of speech, because if we don't, we will lose it. Unused rights are very similar to unused muscles. They will atrophy and become useless after a while if no one uses them. So that's really what this is all about. It is 11:55 on Sunday here in Marietta, Georgia. I took the dogs out this morning. Felt a little chilly. It is 61 degrees Fahrenheit. So it was probably like 50 when I went out there. So I think that's probably 50 is probably like 12 or something in Celsius. Not exactly sure. But the thing I did want to talk about, and I feel like it's one of the things that I'm most qualified to talk about, and that my opinion is relevant. Honestly, most things, my opinion is not particularly relevant because I have a very limited view of the world. But one thing I do have a lot of experience with is computer coding and working with immigrants and stuff like that. And I do want to say that I think that immigrants, workers have been nothing but a positive for the U.S. in general, as from what the worker brings to the table part. And I think it is a bit of a mess, and it is a bit, it's like it's not a very positive thing in general. And I think literally 100% of the blame for that lack of positivity in software development, particularly when it comes to workers and immigrant workers, is on the full 100% of the blame falls on the side of Americans and the American management and American leadership. I think we've done a really bad job of managing that. And I used to be pretty much on the fence about that, but now, but something happened to me. Maybe I want to say it was probably 15 years ago or so. I was on a trip to Australia, and me and my wife we were watching a track meet. Our kids were participating in a track meet in Australia, and we were watching the event. And this lady started talking to us, and she was like 40, in her mid 40s, very, not like in terrible shape, but if she could, there's no way she could run a mile, right? So, and we were like kind of going back and forth. She's like, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm a computer programmer." And I was like, "Oh, what do you do?" And she's like, "Oh, I'm a fruit picker." And the thing about Australians that I found, I don't know if this is just the ones that I ran around or if this is in general, is they're pretty usually very happy to share information about themselves. They're not the most they're not usually very like cards close to the chest. They're just usually pretty open, willing to talk. And she was like a fruit picker. She made like $45 an hour, and she, wasn't particularly fit. And so, I was just like, having grown up, like when I was a kid, in the summers between the ages of 10 and 15, me and my little brother, who was 2 years younger than me, so for him it would have been 8 and 13. We used to go, and there was a local farm, and we would pick vegetables. And every once in a while, when the vegetables were really coming in, there would be migrant workers there. And so, I had a lot of experience with migrant workers. I mean, just absolutely beautiful people, just brilliant superhumans. It's the kind of job you just cannot do unless you are just very different physically, mentally, emotionally. You have to be very, very resourceful, very, very smart, very, very, like, be able to kind of be the kind of person that can work 12 hours where the temperatures are reaching 100 10 degrees Fahrenheit, with very little water and all that, and then you got to be able to recover and be ready to go the next day. And then as soon as that work stops, you got to be able to figure out where to go next, right? So like most humans would not be able to, particularly Americans, would not be able to actually withstand that. So it always cracks me up when these farmers say, "I try to pay good money, but you just can't get Americans to do this job," and it's just like, yeah, no, that job would actually kill most Americans, physically kill them. And in most cases, the farmers aren't even aware of how harsh the work environments are for those people. So I talked to this lady. I was just like, how is this lady a fruit picker? And she's describing the job, and it's just like literally every Friday they all came in for a meeting and they looked at the weather forecasts, and then they would show up in their semi trucks with a bunch of equipment, and then they'd roll out and they would have lifts and they would pick their veggies or their fruits, and it was sound like a very, very pleasant job, and it paid very well, like a full living condition wage. And then it was just like, man, see, it's just like, yeah, Americans would be happy to be fruit pickers if fruit picking in the United States was the same way as fruit picking in Australia was. So I think that ChatGPT is sort of it sort of is a really good parser. It goes through like sort of all the human dialogue and about a specific thing, and then sort of cherry picks out like the best, or the most, not the best, but the most accepted answers. And so I thought that it would be a good idea to just discuss this with ChatGPT. So I explained that I spoke to someone in Australia. She was not very fit, but she was a fruit picker and she enjoyed her job. Conversely, most fruit pickers in the USA are very fit and they don't enjoy their jobs. Do you know why? So, maybe this question isn't a fair question, but that was what I posed to ChatGPT. And I think it pretty much went through all of the knowledge that we've gotten, and it came to the same conclusion as me. And sometimes it does just want to be like agree with you. So maybe if I had posed the question different, it would have come up with different answers. But they did mention Australia's labor law practices. In Australia is like fruit picking is something people do for like just to earn money while they're on a trip, backpacking and stuff like that. And it's the wages are just more fair, which is was what I thought, my observation. Whereas in Australian the USA workforce, it's done by immigrant laborers, many of whom are from Latin America. These workers endure harsher conditions, lower pay, and longer hours. The physical nature of the work, coupled with challenging conditions like extreme heat, make the job demanding. Additionally, workers may not have the luxury of choosing the job for enjoyment. It's often necessity for survival. So basically, these people in the U.S., not only are they vulnerable, but then we make them vulnerable. And cultural perceptions, yeah. So in Australia, most people kind of consider fruit picking like an adventurous sort of thing. And in the U.S., it's like disgusting, right? That's how most Americans see fruit picking. Like most Americans are ashamed of seeing it that way, but that is how most Americans see it. And then the health, like the situation, like you're on a vacation. If it's not worth it, you can go back home, or, you can go find somebody else to do. Whereas here, it's like a physically demanding thing. And so, yeah. And so you would be hard pressed to find an actual American citizen that does fruit picking. Whereas, in Australia, it's a job that actual Australians will do. So to me, when they say like it's a job that Americans won't do, and then you see that like Americans are willing to play NFL football, they're willing to work in factories, auto factories, they're willing to ride on garbage trucks. The people who are willing to do that are not willing to go in your fields and pick fruit and pick vegetables. That's something that's negative about the job, not about the people, right? Like when I look outside and I see clear Americans riding on the back of those, that dangerously riding on the back of garbage cups, jumping out, grabbing a big giant garbage can and throwing it, physically manhandling that thing to get the garbage out of there. And then you're telling me you can't find someone like that's not willing to do your job as a fruit picker or as a vegetable picker. You need to rethink what you're doing. So that was sort of my take, and I think it's all about exploitation and limited rights. And then, yeah, a lot of it is probably more like someone that's here doing it is probably because they have vulnerable people back home that need that money. Whereas the people who are doing it in Australia are doing it like, oh, this is a fun way. I'm backpacking. I'm having fun. So yeah, that's going to be tough. Um, and then this was the other thing is when I was talking to the Australian lady, she was talking about like millions of dollars of equipment that they were using. Whereas here in the United States, you get a bucket. You have a bucket and you got to manually lean over and reach over and pick those beans or pick whatever. You don't get a lift. You don't get something they don't grow it up high so that you don't have to lean over. It is in rows on the ground. No effort at all to make it better for you. So, so yeah, access to equipment I think was a big thing in the USA, and then control over your work. Yeah, in Australia they sit down, they would decide, oh, it's going to be 100, it's going to be very very hot next week, so we're going to go to this other place that's cooler. Oh, it's going to be cooler next week. We're going to go to this place. They had a lot of control over when they did it. Whereas the U.S., it's like you do it when they tell you to do it. So the psychology goes back to this. I'd never really thought about this. This was completely new, and then I see this exact same dynamic playing out in the U.S. And at one point in my life, I worked with this dude who was maybe, it's hard to tell. When people are more intelligent than you, it's hard to tell if someone's like twice as smart as you or 10% smarter than you, or just smarter people are smarter. It's very difficult to tell how much smarter. This guy may possibly be the smartest person I ever worked with. He was from Turkey, and he was like, he had a keyboard that was in French. It was a French keyboard, but it went in Turkish and some software that turned it to English. So like nobody could use his system. And that was what he had to do just to make computer programming challenging enough for him to be able to stand doing it all day. But he had a parent that was in Turkey, and that parent was in a Turkish prison. And basically he had to pay for that parent to be able to see a lawyer every day so that the lawyer could come in and ensure that he wasn't tortured. So yeah, that was a bad situation, right? And his wife was a teacher, a school teacher, and she would taught advanced placement kids, and she taught computer programming. And they had made the comment how like they would get these brilliant American kids that would come in, and they would be very very good at computer programming, and then around 14, 15 years old they would just leave. Like the migrant kids, immigrants would stick with it, but the foreign kids, and they could never understand why. And I was just like, yeah, I told my kids not to be computer programmers. Wow. And the reason is, honestly, is because I think all of these things are true. It sucks being a computer programmer because you don't have any power over your life. You don't get to say what you want. There's all these expectations that you just don't have an opinion. You just grind out the work, and you better not even voice. Now, my current job is not like that, but like most of the jobs that I've worked in are like that. And the management feels very comfortable exploiting you. They don't even realize they're exploiting you, because the problem is that, and I think it also seems like h1b programmers can't say no to bad ideas because they fear losing their work status. So like when somebody, that is true. I think the lack of mobility is the big problem. H1B programmers, if we want to make programming in the United States to be a decent job that hardworking Americans want to participate in, we have to give H1B workers mobility. They have to be able to say, oh, I would like to leave this job and go to another job. And, and right now they can't. Right now, the other job would have to pay a ton of money to get them over. And there's a lot of work to get them over. There's no reason for that. If someone has proven that they have the chops to develop good software solutions, they should be able to go to next door and work at the next place over. That is bullcrap, and that needs to be fixed. And as long as that's fixed, there'll be almost no difference between fruit picking and Latin Americans and H1B workers and like sort of Europeans, Asians coming over here and just being exploited. And nobody wants to be exploited, but it is worth it to be exploited for a lot of people from other countries because there's some really cool things about living in the US in general. The US we have a tremendous amount of freedom here that you can't even describe to other people from other countries. Like they just can't. Like when I was in Australia, they would be like, "Is it legal to smoke marijuana?" And it was like, "Well, it depends on what state you're in. If you're in some states, you can legally smoke marijuana. In other states, you cannot." How old do you have to be to get married? Well, it depends on what state you're in. They would ask all these questions. Oh, can you have a gun? It depends on what state you're in. And that would never compute because they have this top-down thing in Australia where they decide on some rules up here at the top, and then they have literally every single person is in the government in some way enforcing these rules. The United States does not. We have more of a bottom-up rule, so they just don't get it. But you know, I think that this is. I don't think this is the biggest problem, right? I really don't. I think pay for H1Bs tends to be pretty good, although I'm not sure if it's getting stolen, right? So they say, oh, we're going to pay $100 an hour for this programmer, and he's from India, but he may only be seeing $12 an hour. I just don't know. It's and there all these different people are taking slices of it along the way. I'm not sure about that. I think, and see, that's the thing is they will work longer hours without adequate compensation because they fear losing their H1B. And they will absolutely not report unfair things. And I do want to kind of finish with see this team dynamic between foreign and American is such a bad thing, and this happens all the time. Leads to flawed implementations or poor architectural choices being approved simply because no one objected. They won't say what they really think because they're afraid of losing their sponsorship. And it's freaking killing software development. And I will say, I just want to kind of end, this management blind spots. Exploitation becomes normalized. They feel very comfortable saying, oh yeah, we want you to work on holidays because we can, and you don't push back. Like if you come up to a bunch of Americans and say, hey, we want you to work on Christmas Day, the Americans get all pissed off, and then they go, okay, yeah, let's not make them work on Christmas Day. But then, like, you can go to a place where, like, you make them all work on Diwali. I think Diwali is the name of the thing. And they all have to work, and none of them will push back. And then they hate their American counterparts because the American counterparts get this special privilege of getting to take their special days off. They're like, of course I get to have that day off. It's Christmas. So, that is the thing. And I would say that, I would say that I would mistreatment, and then, it definitely hurts. Very few Americans want to become developers. wages are absolutely ridiculous. When I bought my house, I earned 150% of the value of my house. So like today, I earn like less than 33% of the value of my house. In actual real terms of including inflation, I don't earn anywhere near what it does. But in actual dollars, I don't earn anywhere near what I earned back then. And now I'm like a senior developer with 25 years of experience, and very rarely, and I bring a lot of value to any team that I'm on. Back then, I was kind of a sharp upstart who hadn't, so yeah, it's not even vaguely close. Yeah, it's just the amount of the pay. What has happened in pay in software development is a joke. It's an absolute joke. And like, there are plenty of fields now where just the entry level person that doesn't really know anything earns way more than a skilled, proven developer with decades of experience. It's just an absolute joke. And I do want to end this sort of complaining session. One thing I do want to say is it really hurts us from the future of America perspective. Like, we literally just can't code. And like my son, he's like we sent him to a boot camp. He's a very natural software developer. He could be a very, very good software developer. And we sent him to a boot camp. We spent like $15,000 on him for like I want to say a 6-month boot camp or something like that. And and he learned React and JavaScript and all that. And honestly, he never would have been able to get through it. It was just so unrealistic what they were expecting people to do if he didn't have me to sort of read the actual things and sort of guide him. And then a lot of his classmates never would have made it through if he hadn't been able to guide them. So like the course itself, the boot camp itself was ridiculous. It was not something where they could take someone who wasn't already a very good developer and make them. But at the end, there were no jobs. And so he went back to college, and now he's a senior in accounting. And they're getting all kinds of assignments that absolutely require you to know how to program. And none of it. He says the only people who are succeeding are people who basically, in some way, were either they had kind of been programmers before, their parents were programmers, but they had some way had a lot of exposure to computer programming. So it's really hurting us that we don't really have any domestic motivation for computer programming. So I do want to end with I did an interview, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago. I was pretty desperate for a job, but I went in there, and the guy that I was interviewing with, so it was in this big, beautiful building, and I went downstairs, and when I came in through the lobby was just lush. It was beautiful, plants everywhere. It was just this gorgeous lobby, and then there was like this gazebo, and they were having a little birthday party, and everybody was dressed so nice, and it was just beautiful. And then I got on the elevator, and I got to the floor I was going to, and like when the elevator door opened, well, I was with other people, and as we were going up, the door would open, and it was beautiful, 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 beautiful. The floor that I got onto to go do my interview, when the elevator opened, it was disgusting. The wave of body odor and rotten food just hit me like a brick. And so I go in there, and there's this lady who was just miserable. She was an American lady. She was like the sitting at the counter, and she was just like, "May I help you?" And you could just tell she was just bitter. And so I tell her, "Oh, I'm here for an interview," and so we have this very pleasant conversation. She's just really enjoying it, and so it was supposed to be like a 1 hour long interview. And so I sat there and wait, and then we got in about 10 minutes late. I got in for my interview. I started talking to him. He was this Indian guy, and he was very brilliant. And there was another guy, and he was like one of those, I think they're called Sikhs. He had like a turban, and he had like a dagger. And he was just there for the interview, but he wasn't paying attention at all. Like he was just down, just typing away on a computer the whole time, just tap, 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 tap. And the manager, he's talking, he's very pleasant, smiling, just a good guy. He starts asking me these Angular questions that are just very weird. And so I believe that we were on like Angular 10, maybe Angular 12 at the time. And that's what the current Angular was. And he starts asking me all these questions, and he's telling me that they have the software and it's due like in 2 months. And he's asking me these front end questions that aren't even relevant anymore. They're about modules and stuff that just completely changed. They were in Angular 2 and then were gone by Angular 4. And I'm starting to realize, oh my gosh, they've been working on this thing for years now. And they got some giant mess of software that's in Angular 2. And this stuff's all due in like 3 months. And it's going to be hell. And like when I was waiting to go in there, like there was all these broken vending machines in the break room, and like piles of microwaves sitting on each other. So like basically anything that was broken just got thrown into their break room. And it was like a nice structure. Oh, there was holes all in the walls. It just smelled bad. It was just disgusting. And so we're talking, and we're about 15 minutes into the thing and into the interview. And then I was just like realizing that, yeah, this is a lost cause. These guys have no chance. And it's just going to be absolutely hell to try to work on this project. So I just said, oh, well, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you. I wish you nothing but luck on this project. And we kind of shake hands, and he realizes that I'm basically saying, yeah, I don't want to work here. And as I'm leaving, the lady's just like sad. You could tell she was hoping I would work there, but she could tell that the interview had only lasted a few minutes when it should have gone for a whole hour. So that's not a good sign. But the thing is it was a shithole. It was an absolute shithole. These people didn't deserve to work in those environments. And that is unfortunately very much like most software situations in this country. And we have got to get by that. If we don't get by that, if we don't figure that out, we aren't going to be able to compete in the future in this country. And this falls squarely on our lawmakers and on our management teams here in the United States. They have to figure this out. We can't figure it out at our level. All we can do is the code. We can give you feedback, but if you bring in people who can't give you feedback, then you don't even have that. So that's what I think. Obviously, use it or lose it. Happy coding, everybody. Bye.